Thank you, James. Whoa, that is a bright light. Goodness gracious. Ed, you're going to be nervous when you get up there, dude. Ed doesn't know this about me, but I've been stalking him for many years following his career as a restaurateur and as the youngest son of one of 4 children to Florida's 41st governor, Lawton Chiles. Lawton was one of the few examples of a political leader where myself, a lifelong Republican, and my wife, a lifelong Democrat, could actually agree on supporting the same candidate. And when you learn more about Ed, you will see an image of Lawton embedded in this remarkable person who's going to speak to you tonight. So when James first asked me to introduce Ed, I kind of played hard to get and said, let me look at my schedule. But behind me, I knew I was going to cancel whatever I had to get this opportunity to introduce to you Mr. Chiles. I'm not going to roast him or anything like that. I do have one question for you. Now that my eyes are becoming acclimated to this light and I can actually see you, how many of you know what botarga is? Okay, then you're in for a treat. You're not going to get to actually experience firsthand any botarga, but you're going to get a really good feel of what this remarkably industrious person is doing. Ed is a restaurateur, and for those of us that grew up in the Florida area, we recognize restaurateurs as kind of there's a lot of them out there, and they oftentimes are difficult to distinguish, but Mr. Chiles has certainly distinguished himself. He has 4 restaurants, mostly in the Manatee County area. The Sandbar at Anna Maria, the Mar Vista Dockside, which is my favorite, on North Longboat Key. If you ever get a chance to, if you want to see what an old Florida restaurant looks like, that would be one of the ones that I would advise that you visit. And then the beach house on Bradenton Beach. But what I didn't know is Ed is also involved as a co-owner in Lola Wines. And I don't really fancy myself a wine connoisseur. I just fancy myself as a wine consumer. And so I'm going to be interested if Ed can let us know what Lola means. And he's also associated with the Anna Maria Fish, the fish company. Ed's involvement in the restaurant industry is a multi-generational thing. Governor Chiles was one of the very first investors of the Red Lobster restaurant chain. And of course, Ed's involvement is well known, but what is little known is Ed's daughter Kristen's involvement in the restaurant industry. And she has opened as a part of her ministry work, her missionary work, in Thailand, Burma, I think is where it is, a restaurant there, and that's I found that to be pretty fascinating. Quickly, a little known fact about Ed Chiles. Ed used to be an exotic animal trainer at Great Adventure Safari in New Jersey. He was actually, get this, he was in charge of the baboon section, right? He was the warden. They call him the warden of the baboon section. And I got to thinking to myself, Ed, you need to go to the Florida legislature. Because if you can manage... All right, I'll stop with that. Really what I should be saying is just this gentleman walks the walk. He is a true Floridian. He loves this state. He loves the portion of Manatee County where he has the greatest experience, and he's passionate. And you're going to see the passion, you're going to feel the passion in his voice when he explains to you how he has taken this industry of serving food and actually uses that industry to promote the preservation of Florida culture, Florida heritage, Florida history, and indeed the Florida environment. And that is what most recently attracted me to Ed, is that the Gulf Coast Community Foundation had a challenge grant, the Gulf Coast Challenge Grant that we offered. It's $500,000. It's a $500,000 grant, which is virtually unheard of in this area. And we solicited from a group of entrepreneurs and investors and not-for-profits, how can you take this rich Florida marine landscape that we have and actually turn it into an industry without compromising the natural resource? And that's a lot easier said than done. So we vetted some 40-odd applications from around, they really came from around the world, but most of them were confined to the United States. Things dealing with cancer research and purifying fresh water. And Ed's team, Healthy Earth, won that challenge. I have this quote that I'm going to end with, and I'm going to ask Ed to come up and join me here. And I found this one on the internet, and it says, God has given us a beautiful product from our beautiful waters, and we have the privilege of living nearby. All that speaks of who we are and what we value. Man and harmony in his environment. We care about our local resources and local footprint. Ed Chiles.
Well, what a privilege to be introduced by you, John. Thank you. Wow. I had no idea that John was going to introduce me. And I've been an admirer of his work and his public service. It's not easy to be in public service these days, and John certainly was someone who served his community as a public servant very ably for many years and continues that service in a variety of ways. I'm looking for my water. There it is. And I want you to know how flattered I am to be here tonight. And I got a kick at you on the story about Dad and the Red Lobster. So I'll open and tell you just a little bit more about that. I had the best dad you could ever have, and a great business partner. He was my partner in all three of the restaurants, and was not above schooling me when I needed to be schooled. I got out of University of Florida with a political science degree and had to find a way to make a living, and that's how I ended up in the restaurant business. Went to Joe's Stone Crab for a year and started out as a dishwasher, and then came up and we bought an old proverbial Sal's Ear, which was the sandbar restaurant up on the beach in Anna Maria. I made every mistake there was to make. Made some of them 2 or 3 times. And he was great about having faith in me and supporting me. The Red Lobster story is an interesting story. My dad is a lawyer and a politician, and most lawyers aren't that good at business people, and they're not really known for being risk takers. But my dad was certainly a risk taker. If you know his political career, you know that he walked the state of Florida in 1970. My mom was insistent Dad was always very ambitious in terms of politics. He got into the State House of Representatives in 59 and ran for did 8 years there, and then was in the state Senate for 4 years. And when he got ready to run statewide, my mom was very insistent that he not do something that would put the family in debt. When he ran in 59, he walked every door in the district, in this House district. He beat a 10-year incumbent that was head of the most powerful committee in the House, and he did it by just going out and wearing out a lot of shoes and fighting off a lot of dogs and carrying a bunch of dog biscuits. And so when it came time to run for the United States Senate, they decided together, because my mom was really the one that was behind all the good ideas with my dad, or a lot of the good ideas with my dad, and that's where the walk got started, and that's what really made him a different kind of politician and kept him from having to spend all his time on the phone raising money. I remember the first campaign was $10, and the second campaign was $10. We finally got to $100, which felt, but it was a great campaign. It made us work our butts off, and once people had skin in the game, they were real believers. But he started the Red Lobsters with $1,500, and he wasn't just a partner. He was the guy that started it. It was a piece of land that my grandmother had. He borrowed money from our maid and family members, and then he did the building, and he had the land, and so he wasn't the operator, but the guys that had Gary's Duck Inn, they were the people that still run Darden today, Joe Bill and Charlie Woodsby, whose son Ronnie is a real noted restaurateur. And I remember my mom sitting around the dining room table saying, when are we going to see some money for this? And 5 or 6 years later. But it really was what allowed my dad to be in politics, because he didn't have to bill hours anymore after it really got going. He did 4, then they took off and were going and blowing, and he couldn't keep up with them. But it really allowed him to be in politics. So, and the monkey jungle, I've only got an hour tonight. We could be here all night telling stories about the monkey jungle. But that was everything I learned about life. I think most of it I learned in the monkey jungle. I had 140 baboons. It was the largest drive-through safari park in the country at its time in Jackson, New Jersey. And I got the job. I got up there early. My dad knew the guy that was doing the park, and I was a gate man. And they put me, and I'd been there for about a month before anybody else got, the gate people and anybody but the wardens got in. And the wardens had all had large animal experience and were, to be revered. And so the guy that was the warden, they put me on the monkey jungle gate because that was a tough gate, because the monkeys are smart, as I found out, extremely smart. They make a monkey out of you most days. And so there was the gates that come into the section from the sheep and goats had 10 feet of sheet metal up top, and then the gates. And so the monkeys would try to run through the gates when things got opportunistic, like there was a bus there or something like that. And so you had to be kind of nimble, and you had to be smart enough to know that you just get in the gatehouse when the monkeys are all starting to run through and not stand in the monkey's way. But the guy that was supposedly the Jumbo Bwana warden for the monkey jungle faked his experience, and they ripped 300 vinyl tops the first 2 days off of cars. And I wanted a zebra strike pickup truck and to be a warden worse than anything. And my friends that I lived with were all wardens, said, the last place you want to work is the monkey jungle. They are vicious, yada, yada. And it was the most fun I ever had in my life. And after a couple of weeks, I got to know them all. And anyway, that's not what I'm here to talk about tonight, but I thought I'd open with that. I'm struck today. I had not been down here and spent a lot of time down here since the old days of campaigning with Dad. And I'm really struck with the John Nolen story and the parallels to what I'm going to talk about today in urban living and revitalization and planned living. I live in paradise, as y'all do. Anna Maria Island, I don't ever remember not being in Anna Maria Island. My first time there, I was there in utero. I had the privilege of being from Lakeland, Florida. And by the grace of our geography, Anna Maria was the closest place to go to the beach. And the thing that I love so much about Anna Maria today is the thing that I hated about Anna Maria when I was 14 or 15 years old, that there's nothing to do there. There are no high-rises, there are no chains, there are no go-kart tracks, there are no amusement parks. What there is a low-rise, high-quality, great high-integrity slice of old Florida, as John says. And you go back to the history, which parallels somewhat the history here. This is Pine Avenue. This is our main street. This is the northern end of Anna Maria Island. There are 3 municipalities on Anna Maria: Braden Beach, Holmes Beach, and the city of Anna Maria. The city of Anna Maria is the north end, where my first restaurant, the Sandbar, is. And that is the linear half a mile, very much like your main street, to the beach, from the city pier that was built in 1911. There are 10 houses on the island in 1911. Obviously, there are no roads, there are no bridges, there are no automobiles. And the Anna Maria Beach Development Company plats the village, the area, and they build the city pier, and they advertise it as the next great resort. And they bring in 300 to 400 sports a day from parts north, and they arrive by one of 4 steamers. And they promenade down Pine Avenue, linear half mile, okay, there we go. Down the little sand path, which is the main street, this is Roser Church. Roser Church was started in 1912, and it was started by Mr. Roser, who was a partner in the Anna Maria Beach Development Company. And Mr. Roser's claim to fame was he developed the Fig Newton, sold it for $1 million and to Nabisco, and he built that chapel in honor of his wife. So this is Main Street. These are the folks that would come down, and they'd come into the city pier and they would stay around there, but most of them would go down Pine Avenue to the beach, to where in 1912, the next year, they built the bathhouse. And that's the site of that's the bathhouse, and that is the site of the Sandbar restaurant today, which is our first restaurant. In 2007, Pine Avenue that I showed you is the ROR district, residential office retail zoned. We have residential office retail zoning in 2% of our city. We have commercial in 1%. My restaurant is commercial, Galati's Marina is commercial, there's a business district right across, or a building right across from the pier that's commercial. But only 2%, only 3% of our whole island was zoned for business. And this linear half a mile from the bay to the Gulf is that 2% ROR. In 2005, 2004, we had the Pine Avenue Marina. Nobody knew how many lots the Pine Avenue Marina. They had a dry dock place, they had a ship store, they had a little convenience store where you could get some beer and ice and a little bit of bait and you get a good Cuban sandwich. And nobody knew how much land was there until they scraped it and sold it. And then all of a sudden it was 5 lots. And what happened, these first 3 houses got built. Now those are maxed out to get the economic value. FEMA, as we all know, makes us build up. And so that's what they did. A developer did 3 of them, very much alike, kind of cookie cutter. And I'm a big property rights person. So your home is your castle. And whatever the rules say that you have the right to do, I have to respect those rights. But the last thing we wanted to see was us lose our business district, because our Main Street, unlike your Main Street that was started by John Nolen and developed in the first 2 years, never got going. Successive comprehensive plans, our master planning document had called for stronger language to promote mixed use, because the city was saying, we don't want to lose our business district. And when these 3 houses went up, it looked like that could happen, because the street could go 100% residential. I met a guy named Mike Coleman. He had the same concerns I did, that without a place to go get something to drink, something to eat, something to wear, a coffee, a newspaper, then you've lost the most important thread in the fabric of your community. You are no longer a village or a city. You are a subdivision or a neighborhood at that point. And we did not want to see that happen to our community. So Mike had found, he's a real dashing fellow with a tattered hat and cut off jeans or khakis and an old t-shirt. And he had a little red bicycle he found when he built his house. And he built a house actually on Pine Avenue about 5 or 6 years before that. And that's how I met him. It was ICF construction, concrete forms, insulated, big styrofoam cooler basically. And it was very interesting what he was doing with that house, and I met him. And so Mike said, you know, I think we can go out and we can secure a lot of lots and we can take this in a different direction. And I said, well, that sounds great. Why don't you go see what you can do? Mike went around on this little red bicycle that he found in the weeds when he cleared his lot, and he convinced 15 property owners to give us options on their property. So we went to the city and we said, hey, you know, successive comprehensive plans have called for stronger language. We're local. Here's what we will do. We'll do historic designs. We'll do the greenest buildings that have ever been built in the city. We will do native landscaping. We'll do no asphalt, and we'll do no pavers. We will do 2 stories instead of 3. And I had to be convinced of that because there's a lot of economic value that you were sacrificing then. But I quickly saw that that's where the long-term value was, because that reflects the great character and integrity, that low-rise character of Anna Maria. That makes it different from anywhere else. And so we said to the city, we've got some money out, but not a lot of money out now, and we will only do this if you embrace this and you tell us you want us to do it, because frankly, we weren't interested in being pioneers and taking a breastful of arrows. This was going to be a very expensive proposition, and there's going to be a lot of risk involved in it. They said, yes, we want you to do this. Please go forward. I don't want to get too far into the details, but I guess the best thing to say is my father told me that anytime you try to do something really worthwhile, you better expect to go into the pit. We had an election a guy got elected that said we were all, I won't use the words that he used, but that we were going to try to destroy the town, that we weren't really going to do what we said we were going to do. Now, we had 2 buildings built at that point, and we were starting on our 3rd building. The jackleg expert on the codes picked out cherry-picked language, said, they can't do this, we're going to stop them. It got very ugly for about a year. It got very litigious. We finally had our backs against the wall and had to start fighting back. There was an interesting law that a guy named Chiles was very instrumental in, and that's the Florida government, the Sunshine Law, that says you don't have the right to do the people's business without it being in front of the people. So we got a public records expert. The fellow in question said he knew all about those laws and turned over 6 emails. 1,100 emails later, he made history as the first public official ever to be recalled in Manatee County's history, and that recall was successful. So we started out, and here's some of the aspects that you'll see. We had sidewalks that were holding a lot of water, and the water runs off into the bay, and we changed those in. We ripped 5 blocks of those sidewalks out, and we put native pathways in that meander around the buildings. This is the designs that we did, very communal, porches in front, the pathways rolling through. So now instead of seeing the neighbor down the street with the white dog and not knowing who he is, you see him on the porch in front of the Anna Marie Olive Oil Company or the donut shop or Papo's Taqueria or Ginny and Janie's, and you get to know your neighbors. There's the looks, all native vegetation. As I said, these are the greenest buildings that were ever built. They're ICF construction, which is insulated concrete forms, 140-mile-an-hour wind loads. And with our engineer, Lynn Burnett Townsend, we redefined with Swift Mud what could be done in terms of keeping water on your property and having that water percolate down through into the aquifer and not run off. We were forced with new regulations because we had residential around us to be 1 foot lower than everybody else, so it made it that much harder to do. And you can see the look that we achieved here. After we got going, a couple from England came in. They had sold an organic baby food company that had 60% of the market in the United Kingdom and had walked away with a whole lot of money, and they wanted to join in and do great things, and they wanted to do it even greater than we did. And they created on 7 lots the historic Green Village. We got platinum designation from the Florida Green Builders Association, top 10 residences 2 years in a row for a green building. And they came in behind us with the historic Green Village here, taking old homes like a 1937 Sears and Roebuck catalog house that we had on our property. It was fallen down. It was termite eaten. Mike Coleman was the operating partner. I was the managing partner. Mike, can we save it? No, there's no way we can save it. We're going to go broke as it is. Okay, the Thrashers wanted it. We gave it to them. They rolled it down the street and they restored it. And now it has a fly fishing shop and a Patagonia stuff and kayaks and paddle boards, and it just makes me give goosebumps every time that I walk in. It's beautifully restored. I hope you'll take the time to see it when you come up to Pine Avenue. In bettering what we did, they got LEED's Platinum Net Zero Energy Campus on 7 lots. There are a handful of those in the country. That means they produce more energy than they consume on the totality of the project. 2 geothermal wells, don't ask me how it works. One pumps water out of the ground at 72, pumps it back in at 78. There's a heat exchange, 400, 500, 600 kW of photovoltaic. It's all over the roofs there. A great model for WEDU, did a great 30-minute special on it, and it just got that much richer when all of that, and they joined in on top. So here's the house. They actually took this across a canal. It was like the Corps of Engineers. They built piers in the middle of the canal, and they rolled it over and placed it in the middle. This is the 1937 Sears and Roebuck catalog house that we gave them, and that's the fly fishing Anna Marie Outfitters that is there today. We wanted a farm, and I thought it was so interesting today when I was hearing about John Nolen and the master planning and the farms that he had done out east is part of that whole design for living. Well, we wanted a farm. We wanted gardens to come in, and we couldn't quite figure out how to do that because we couldn't sacrifice a lot, community gardens, and how are you going to divide all of that up? And then we met Echo, and Echo is in Fort Myers. And if you love nutritious plants, and they are one of the most spiritual, exciting, just unbelievable places that I have ever seen. They started out with a postage stamp of a half an acre. They now have, I think, 51 acres and 20 structures. They are working in 119 countries around the world, showing people in all kind of climates how they can grow food that will sustain themselves. Things that I had never heard before: moringa, katuk, edible hibiscus, Chinese spinach, Okinawa spinach, Seminole pumpkins that I'm obsessed with, and I'm going to talk to you some about Seminole pumpkins. And so they said, here's what we can do. We can do raised bed organic community gardens. And so we put 8 of them in front of the businesses, and they're about that big and they're about that wide, and they had all of these things. Moringa is one of the most nutritious plants on the planet, and so is katuk. And they grow like crazy, and they stay year after year after year. And you can put them in your super smoothie in the morning, or you can put them in your salads, or you can saute them, or you can do all kind of things with it. And 8 organic raised bed community gardens turned into 40 in the town. And now they've gone to Lakewood Ranch. And everybody out there, because if you get one, you want to talk about it. And your neighbor wants to have one too. These are the gardens. That's the cornucopia. You can literally go down there with garbage bags and take anything you like. It's for the public to harvest. These are Seminole pumpkin blossoms. What's a Seminole pumpkin? I didn't know what a Seminole pumpkin is. Native plant to Florida. Seminole is in the Indians. They used them historically. It has a beautiful blossom, as you can see. This is the meat. The seeds are wonderful when you roast them. The meat is fabulous when you caramelize it. And this is my patch in my side yard at home. And I was getting 70 blossoms a day before I moved out of my house into another house. 70 blossoms of those a day. And we take goat cheese and ricotta and a little bit of garlic and a little bit of Bloomsdale spinach, and we whip that all up, and we put it in a little bag, and we stuff those, and then we roll them in an organic egg, and we put a little panko or a little almond flour on top. And I come home and I say, honey, really, Seminole pumpkin blossoms again? Is that? And they are so marvelous. And now we're using them in the restaurant. And as I said, the meat of them is just outstanding. So you can have these, and you should have these. If you love to cook, if you're excited about these kind of foods, you got to get a Seminole pumpkin plant, and you got to get it in your side yard. You can start it in a pot and start taking those blossoms and getting the pumpkin itself, because the pumpkin will stay forever. And that's me with all of the... This is a class of students from University of South Florida that were out of Taiwan, foreign exchange students who came out and studied with us, and then took all of the food that we were doing from the gardens and made a dinner out of it. Great connection with them. We were having problems. We weren't getting enough pollination. What was wrong? We had bee problem. We didn't have enough bees, and we all know that bees are threatened now, and that they're responsible for 80% of the food that we eat. And so we brought in bees, and that was fabulous, because beekeepers are odd and really fascinating people to be around. And so my house is about a mile from the restaurant, and I've got my herbs all out in my earth boxes, and there's bees all of a sudden coming around, and I know they're bees from our hives. And so now we get Pine Avenue honey, and I get about a case of that every 3 months. And I can take that Pine Avenue honey and make the honey butter that goes with the soon-to-be world-famous hush puppies at the Beach House restaurant. So that's the story of Pine Avenue. That's the story of how a group of local people took the initiative and the risk and set out to make sure that the integrity and the character of their island and the community and the business component that is such an important thread in the fabric of that community was preserved and enhanced, and it has been a tremendously successful project. It's been a wonderful thing to be a part of. Now Pine Avenue, we started this in 2007, purchasing lots. When you say Pine Avenue, people know what you're talking about. And people that want to come and live on Anna Maria or come and stay, the realtors tell me that the one thing they want to do is be in walking distance or bike distance to the Pine Avenue. So we've got a history, too, of seafood. Since man and woman first walked on 2 feet in our area and your area, our history has been about small A agriculture and about seafood. The Indians, all about clams and mussels and fish, and the predominant fish by far then and now is gray striped mullet. Number one export. We have one of the oldest continual fishing villages in Florida is Cortez, right across from Anna Maria Island on the State Road 64 coming across, and that dead ends right into the beach house. Today in the United States, 92% of the seafood that you eat is imported. And 50% of that is aquaculture. Wild, sustainable seafood is the coin of the realm. And nobody appreciates mullet. Well, not nobody. Locally, it's underappreciated. Internationally, it's prized. The number one export out of the oldest continual fishing village in Florida and even on a larger scale, the west coast of Florida, is mullet roe. 1 million pounds a year approximately goes out. Number one product by far. And we're selling our commodity, our treasure for pennies on the dollar. So what happens to the roe? The roe goes to Sardinia, France, and Taiwan primarily. Goes out in 40,000 pound containers, frozen, at an average price of $10 a pound. Small roe sacks are a little bit less, big roe sacks are a little bit more. It's cured in a natural curing process that has kosher salt and a cool dry day or a dehumidifier, dehydrator, and comes back at over $100 a pound at retail after losing 15% of its weight. So what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is the math's wrong with that. This is our treasure. This is who we are. This is our heritage. And we're letting our treasure get out for pennies on the dollar. So what we need to do is we need to capture all the step-ups. We need to capture all of that value add, all of that added economic, all of those added dollars, because that speaks to who we are. And that speaks to us being smart, I hope, and honoring our heritage. And a lot of the mullet is underutilized, and sometimes there is willful and wanton waste. And you may see that down here. So there's the figure of 90% of the seafood and 50% of it being aquaculture. Willie Sutton, why do you rob banks? Well, that's where the money is. Well, for us, mullet is where the money is. The seafood industry, the people that came down, we had the Indians, and then we had the Cubans, and then we had the people that came down from Cataract County, North Carolina in the 1880s, and those families, the Stars, the Fulfords, the Capos, are all still in Cortez today. And in 95, there was a referendum because the politics shifted and the recreational fishermen got more powerful than the commercial fishermen, and they put a whole multi-generations of those families out of business by saying you could no longer use gill nets. You had to use a cast net. There was no empirical evidence. Were there some bad actors? Sure. Are there bad actors in any business or industry? You bet there are. Now, the old-timers will tell you if you want to stop the willful and wanton waste where the males go overboard, you do a 4-inch mesh net because the female is bigger because she's full of roe and she'll get caught in that and the male will go through. So what happens is we have a very inefficient, broken business model. We have 2 fish houses on our island. The roe season in Cortez, the roe season is very compact, and 2 or 3 guys in a 28-foot skiff can make $10,000 a day on a good day. When girls are going to go out and spawn, they go out in mass, and 100 boats will be all out there together, racked up, and they'll be pulling thousands of pounds in. And because we have an inefficient system in terms of big years where there's a ton of mullet out there, we've had 2 of those in the last 6, the males, they pay 15 cents a pound for. The female brings $1.35. When the fish houses get overwhelmed, they stop without any notice buying the males. And guess what? They're not taking the males to the landfill. They're going overboard. And when they go overboard, there's the guys out getting them. You see that in your area. It happens from Thanksgiving until about the end of the year. And when they go overboard, they wash up on our beaches and in our canals and in front of my restaurants. And they make people think we're having red tide. And they make me want to hurt somebody. That's wrong from every single aspect. It's wrong culturally, it's wrong. We ought to be smart enough that we care for other future generations, that we don't throw our seed corn over the side. And it's wrong because that's valuable, God-given treasure. And people need wild, sustainable seafood, and we can do great things with that. So what we're about doing in this process is we're about showing, and that's what the Gulf Coast Community Foundation recognized in our Healthy Earth project, that we can do full utilization. What's the hierarchy of value? Well, the roe is the highest. Take the fillets off and package those, because they're when the mullet is really fat, it's one of the best fish, I think, anywhere. And I serve them from July until the end of the year now. Once they lean out, we stop serving them. So we'll take the fillets off. And then we make fish meal, because 50% of the seafood we're eating is aquaculture, and fish meal is what they're feeding a lot of that fish. And guess what? It doesn't make any sense to go out here and overfish these oceans by 40%, to grind menhaden up and use 5 pounds of menhaden to make a half a pound of salmon that's farm raised that would be gray, 70% of it, if they weren't put in the color additives and the hormones and the antibiotics and the things like this. So that has real value. Mullet is one of the highest fish in the world in omega-3s. So fish oil is something that we're exploring along with Mote Marine. And at the end of the day, you can do fertilizer with it. And so I can take that fertilizer, just like the Indian showed the Pilgrim, call it Cortez Pilgrim's Pride, if you will, and I can take that out to my farm and use less soil amendments and less fertilizer and have the produce that comes back into my restaurant be part of that fish that was watching up on the beach. And that's the right thing to do, and that's the way to preserve working waterfront, and that's the way to speak to our heritage and our character and our values. So that's the Batarga right there. So you shave it like a truffle, and you put it over roasted vegetables, or you put it on pasta, or you put it on crusty bread. And it's fat, and it's round, and it's got a of-the-sea flavor. And if you like an anchovy in your Caesar salad, you will love Batarga in your Caesar salad, or over a little egg. That's Batarga on a little fresh pasta. Here we are at Mote Marine Laboratory. We're also part of their Siberian sturgeon operation, where they did an open book project to take pressure off the Siberian sturgeon. You probably know that no longer are there any countries, or hardly any countries, that will allow any importation of Siberian sturgeon from the Caspian Sea because of the problems in Iran and Russia and the graft and the corruption and the overfishing that species. So Mote started out 15 years ago to do an open book project to show people how to take the pressure off of that species and make money at it. They sold that to a venture capital private equity firm. It needed that business aspect. That firm bought them and then bought us. We did a deal where we took a small amount in cash and the rest of stock because we wanted the capital partner to be able to get to the plant. Because we want to do not only mullet, but we want to do mackerel, and we want to do amberjack, and we want to do octopus. Because when's the last time you go into a market anywhere that you don't see those little 3.5 pounds of sardines and kippers and oysters and clams and all that stuff that we like to eat on the hood of the car when we're hunting, or take out with us for fishing, or even use for chum? And all of that comes from somewhere else. And we can use that for all of those things. And we can value add in a sustainable way. Make sure you're always doing it in conjunction with partners like FWC and Mote to make sure that that's done in a sustainable way. And that brands our area, and that brings the right kind of people to move in that share our values. So we're out here playing with this is a molossal method, which is just harvesting the eggs, 3.7% salt to weight, and that makes a mullet caviar that we're experimenting right now. So we go out and get in the clean room with the suits, and it's a gas. So there it is on the crusty bread. Now here's another fact. 50% of the seafood we eat in the United States is aquaculture. We're producing in this country 1% of the world's aquaculture. Now we got burgeoning, developing countries in India and China and Africa, and more demand for high quality, healthy, center of the plate protein. And we can't be spending billions of dollars on farm programs for monocrops and for cows and pigs and chickens that produce a tremendous amount of methane, and not be at least in the game on how we do aquaculture. And the U.S. because we have the only area in the country right here where there are 3 national estuaries on our border: Tampa Bay, Sarasota Bay, and Charlotte Harbor. That's the black opal caviar, formerly the moat caviar. This is the definition of umami. I love food. It's all about food for me. And if you want to know what umami is, you put a spoonful of that in your mouth, and you'll know what umami is. It is silky, it is briny, it is of the sea, it is round, it is fat, it is rich, and that's probably one of the most expensive foods in the world. And it's being done right here. So then we got into the farming business because the Rural Conservation Management District had 2 CSAs, Community Supported Agriculture Centers, one on the west side of town, one out east. 4 years ago, when all the real estate was going down, they thought the homes were going to be built all around it. They all got shuttered, and the flags tattered, and the weeds grew up, and they were afraid it was going to take the other farm down, so they were looking for an exit strategy, and here I come, because I just thought it would be a great idea to get vertically integrated into the farm business. I can do that. Why did I do that? But it has been great for us, because it allows us, while we haven't made the lines meet yet, it has tremendous value for what we're doing and for the things that we can bring in and grow for our farm, from our farm to our table, with doing the same thing with the seafood. So we've got the ability to have the whole constellation. If I can take those fish that were washing up on my beach, and I can show people batarga, and I can show people mullet fillets, and I can take that product instead of being willfully wanted and wasted, and I can grow vegetables into and bring them into my restaurants, and they're on the menu. And when you go to the bar to get your upscale Bloody Mary and you get an extreme green bean, it's not out of an extreme green bean jar, it's from our farm, and that's when the conversation starts. There's real value in that. If I can take that 20% of the food that I waste that goes to the landfill, and I have to pay for it to go to the landfill, and instead of doing that, I can compost it and take it to my farm, that's where we want to be. That's the total story. So these are the things that we get from the farm. We have 26 acres, half's organic and half is conventional. This is our greenhouse. These are our products. We grow a lot of cabbage. If you go to Whole Foods, you want to get Beagle Bay organic super probiotic cabbage. That's coming from Gamble Creek Farm. We're serving it in all 3 of our restaurants with our wild boar. That's another project that we hook up with Keith Mann from Three Sons Ranch in Punta Gorda. We were the first restaurant in the state. That's about taking the exotic species that's invasive, where there's 1 million extra pigs in Florida that are wreaking havoc. And we like to say it's taking lemons and making limoncello, because the best hams in the world come from Spain. And it's called Iberico Burlata. And Burlata is acorn. And our pigs came from Spain. And they eat acorns. And again, it's an underappreciated product. But try the Beagle Bay. If you're in any of our restaurants, we'll have it. If you go to Whole Foods, you can get it. Super good for your gut. Probiotic. Super, super healthy. Not pasteurized, so it's got a great crunch to it. So this is the heritage. This is, who we are. Here's the area that is the only area in the country that has 3 national estuaries on its shore. And this is one of the most exciting projects and the one that probably has the most potential. James, how am I doing on time? Great. Perfect. You take a look at this shell, and you walk the beaches, you'll see this shell. This is a Sunray Venus clam. And they call it sun rays because you can see that beautiful rays of the sun going through that tawny color. So this is a native clam that has never been raised commercially before. But the guy that's in our constellation, his name is Kurt Himmel. And if you want to read about Kurt Himmel, then look up Kurt Himmel, Hemmel, and look up Klinkenberg was the great feature writer for the St. Pete Times, now the Tampa Bay Times. If you just Google Kurt Himmel, clams, Klinkenberg, you'll get it. It was this time 7 or 8 years ago. It was Sunday before Super Bowl. The story starts out, big feature story. While everybody's getting ready for the Super Bowl, there's Kurt, a floppy hat under a microscope. Kurt Himmel is sitting under a microscope watching clams have sex. I'm hooked. I read the story and I said, okay, I got to find this guy. So I found him, ran him down, and we became acquaintances and then became partners and good friends. So Kurt's skill set is propagating the spawns for bivalves. He's one of the foremost bivalve experts in the world. And I say that because he sells 60% of the spat for the whole eastern seaboard. That's the clam seeds that grow up. So the skill set is propagating the spawn, and the most popular clam by far is Mercenaria mercenaria. That's little neck, middle neck, top neck, quahog, all the same clam, just difference in size. The most popular white tablecloth clam, but it has a very high default rate for freezing and opening. About 20% won't open, so you can't ship them long distance and you can't export them. The most popular red checkerboard tablecloth clam is the Manila. That's the one you see crybacked in the grocery stores with the streaks on it, and the ridges run this way. And so Kurt has been doing those. Clams, by the way, was the only thing that came out of the net ban in 95 and 96 that really worked. When they took the fishermen and they tried to retrain them, and they did a lot of stuff up to Cedar Key, and now there's a thriving clam base in Cedar Key. But what people don't know is Cedar Key is a thimble compared to the Olympic swimming pool of the 3 national estuaries on our border, and we are ground zero for raising clams from the standpoint of water quality, water temperature, and nutrient levels. So Kurt's skill set is propagating the spawn, but it's also being the mother and father's milk of the clam until it gets 2 to 4 millimeters and it's able to go out on its own onto the leases. There are 287,000 acres of shellfish-approved waters in the state of Florida, and 1% are leased. The opportunity is tremendous. Every one of the aquaculture species, the big 3 in the United States are salmon, shrimp, and tilapia. And they all have environmental impacts, fairly heavy environmental impacts in some situations. The biggest worldwide is Asian carp. I didn't know that until about a year ago. I didn't know goat was the #1 meat in the world until recently. So they all have a degree of environmental issue, like most things that you grow. Certainly everything that you grow on land has that. Bivalves not only have 0 environmental impact, they have a very positive impact because every single organism, every clam, every bivalve, every oyster, every sea cucumber filters 10 gallons of water a day. And they promote the benthic environment by firming up the sand. They make you put them on areas that don't have any grasses. That's ridiculous. That's something that we'll work on as we go forward with the Department of Agriculture folks and the other environmental people. But if you put those clams on there, Michael Crosby, Dr. Crosby, head of Moat Marine Lab, will tell you that in a matter of a year or 2, you'll start seeing the grasses come up from the nitrogen that gets released in the waste stream that comes from the clam. So enter Sunray Venus. Kurt starts studying it 12 years ago. 8 years ago, he puts a study group together with the people that he's in his constellation of the experts to try to find out what are the mitigating factors and knocking them off one by one. And last year, I had this clam for a month in my restaurant. It is 3 to 1 meat to shell ratio. You can see how meaty it is. It is sweet, more like a conch, and it is more tender. And it is a fabulous clam that can be the next tomato for the state of Florida. Now, that's a very bold statement. Tomato business in Florida is a $400 million business on 40 to 50,000 acres. 1,000 acres of these clams, 500,000 conservatively an acre, is $100 million at 20 cents a clam. I'm paying 35 for them right now. Price has got to come down. So 4,000 acres could be the equivalent of a tomato when we've got 287,000 acres of shellfish approved waters. And look at the relative impact of 40,000 acres of tomatoes with water usage and land usage and fertilizers and insecticides and all of that. And I love tomatoes and I'm all for them and I'm all for the tomato farmers. And then look at 4,000 acres of bivalves and the working waterfront opportunity and the opportunity to show that the United States can be a model and this area, that our character and our values can be about, we're going to be the area that promotes this and shows people how they can look for what they have in their area to continue to build their everybody's history of working on growing their own things and sustaining themselves. So we're going to go from these to all kind of different species. Blood arcs, we're working on some projects with oysters that are very exciting. They got different colors. The Asian market is going to love these. You can white fruit fly thing we did back in the old days where you breed them in. I don't understand it all, but you can kind of get them where you get more colors going in it. They are so fabulous. Hot pan, put them in there, just a touch of olive oil in the pan. They're going to open in 3 minutes, very quickly, 2 minutes. You hit them with a little bit of white wine first, a little bit of fresh herbs, a little bit of garlic, a little bit of chicken stock. Boom, 3 minutes, you're putting them over pasta or putting them with some crusty bread. Love to do the crusty bread with the bottarga and then soak it all in that pan jus. It's all about the food. It's all about the food. So that's the old bathhouse. That's the site of the bathhouse in 1912, and that's the Sandbar restaurant. That's the bathhouse burned down in the early 40s. The story is that they had the booze in the bushes and they were pouring gasoline on the fire. That's an old surplus army barracks that's in the exact shape of what the restaurant is now, the interior of the restaurant with a little cupola on it. That's the beach house. That's just been renovated. Beautiful contemporary renovation. We're in the process of doing the Mar Vista. This is a little classic dive with a 14-slip dock, and it's a great piece of old Florida. Unfortunately, we've got to take the bait shack portion of it down this year because it is crumbling, and we can no longer ignore that. And we have worked through 8 different designs to come up with a fabulous design that really speaks to the history. It's got a water tower in it, and I think it's going to really be a great, that's Mar Vista. And this magical area under the trees. There's the mullet. There's the wild boar. And there's the stuff from our farm. And these are some of the great high-end dishes that our culinary team does. So that's what the model is. It's about, looking back at our past and respecting that and mirroring that and taking advantage of that because that's where the value is. If you don't want to do it for this, do it for this. That's what makes Anna Maria different. That's what makes people want to come. That's what attracts the right kind of crowd that we want to have in our area. So this was a statement by our partner, Mike Coleman, that operating partner, that really kind of sums it up, that it reflects that that's Anna Maria, that's not FOMED, that's not Key West. There's something about this place, Anna Maria, where the sand gets in your shoes and you want to come back. And I've run out of juice at just about the right time.